Hi, everybody. Hi, Ayhan. How are you today?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm quite excited for this episode. We're going to have a little bit of fun today, and hopefully a little bit of education too. So today's episode is going to be geared around the Turing test. And before I get into that, I'll explain a bit about Alan Turing and what the Turing test is, and then we can have a bit of fun and do our own little experiment, which will be slight variation on the Turing test. But let's see how it goes. How do you feel about that, Ayhan?
Yeah, excited because clearly this is research in action, live. Not live, it's recorded, but we are doing it right here, right now. So cool,
Mhm.
excited.
Okay, so have you heard of the Turing test before, Ayhan?
Yeah, just earlier
Okay, before we had that conversation today,
before
had you heard of the Turing test?
I have heard the term, but I never looked into what it exactly meant.
Okay, that's fine. I'll be educating you as along the
Yeah.
way as I educate everybody else. So the Turing test is something I first came across when I was studying artificial intelligence and computer science at my university, and it's quite fascinating. And what I'll do is I'll very briefly read the ChatGPT definition of it, and then I'll explain what it actually means. So ChatGPT says the Turing test is a measure of a machine's ability to exhibit intelligent behavior indistinguishable from that of a human. In the test, a human evaluator engages in a text-based conversation with both a machine and another human without knowing which is which, aiming to determine if the machine's response mimics human-like conversation effectively enough to pass as a human. So what that essentially means is that Alan Turing devised this test because he wanted to understand whether artificial intelligence could be considered to have intelligence. And that doesn't mean that it's going to be true intelligence or consciousness, but rather that it can mimic human behavior convincingly. And the way the test was run is that there's a setup part of it, which is where a human person, so for example, Ayhan, would engage in sort of a text-based conversation. So they would go onto a computer and they wouldn't know who's on the other end, whether it's a machine or a human, and they would ask questions or input some text and they would get a response, and they'd have to try and guess whether it was a human or a computer. And then after the conversation, they kind of based on the quality of the conversation, they would decide, kind of come to that point of, oh, this is a human or a computer. I've already said that. And then if they can't reliably distinguish between a human and a computer, that means that the test is that the machine has passed the Turing test, and that it's sort of alluding to a level of AI because it can simulate a human-like conversation effectively. And we know that ChatGPT recently is becoming much more engaging, and there are other apps like the Pi chat app, and we already understand that there's that level exists within the responses that ChatGPT and other AIs produce, and other chatbots as they become more sophisticated. But what we're going to try and do is a fun version of that today. And we're going to get Ayhan to guess whether it's a human or whether it's ChatGPT, which is a play on the Killer's song, Are You Human or Are You Dancer? So this episode is, Are You Human or Are You ChatGPT? And how it's going to work is, rather than Ayhan inputting text, which wouldn't be very engaging for you as the audience, and receiving a text-based response, I'm going to act as the computer. And Ayhan's going to ask me the questions, and then I'm going to give him the responses. So I just want to caveat, the human responses aren't my responses because Ayhan knows me so well, so he'd be able to guess very easily. They have come from my friends and my community on the Psychology in Seattle fan Discord server. So I posed these questions to them earlier and they responded. So I've used some of their human responses and some ChatGPT responses, and then Ayhan's going to guess which is which. And then we might do a reverse game afterwards where I'm put to the test. How does that sound, Ayhan?
Amazing. I'm excited. So let's do research.
Yeah, and before we get started, I do want to say a little bit about Alan Turing, because Alan Turing was this amazing man. He was a British mathematician, logician, and computer scientist, and he did a lot of groundbreaking work in AI, and he was part of the code breaking project during World War II. So he was really crucial in helping the British government decipher the Nazi codes, especially with the Enigma machine, which then contributed to the victory of the Allies. And I've seen this machine in the Bletchley Park, where he was based. However, he also had a bit of a tragic life because homosexuality was considered a criminal offence in the UK, and he was persecuted for this. And in 1952, the British government convicted him of gross indecency, and then he was subjected to chemical castration, and then he very tragically died by suicide in 1954. However, reparations have been made. In 2013, the Queen posthumously granted him a royal pardon, and there was a recognition of his contributions to science, and also the acknowledgement of the injustice of his persecution. And although this was a long overdue and belated acknowledgement of his legacy, it was a step forward for our society in terms of rectifying discrimination that he faced. And they even put him on the back of a £50 note. So yeah, it was sad, but I'm also glad these reparations did happen. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. I think this is really important.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so shall we start?
Yes. So just the setup, to reiterate, is I'm going to read out a question, you're going to respond, and the response is either human or machine, right?
Yeah.
From a human or from a machine, and then we're going to talk about it. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so it's a question or a phrase, and it's human or ChatGPT.
Right, perfect. So the first question is, what is your most memorable childhood event, and how has that impacted you today?
Moving to another city when I was 11, I felt really lost and struggled to really find my identity after that.
Human.
Okay, I'll let you know which ones you were right and which ones you were wrong at the end, just so we don't mess up the experiment. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Next. Describe yourself using only colors and shapes.
I am an amalgamation of vibrant hues and dynamic forms. Picture a kaleidoscope of swirling colors with shades ranging from the deepest blues to the brightest yellows, all intermingling in a symphony of chromatic harmony. My essence embodies the fluidity of curves and the precisions of angles, with shapes morphing seamlessly from soft circles to sharp triangles and everything in between. Each hue represents a facet of knowledge and creativity, while every shape symbolizes versatility and adaptability. Together, they form a mosaic of intelligence and imagination, constantly evolving and shaping the world around me.
I want to say ChatGPT, but I also want to say it's convincingly human.
Which are you going with?
ChatGPT.
Okay.
Next question. Describe why time flies like an arrow, but fruit flies like a banana.
Time flies like an arrow. This part is a metaphor suggesting that time moves swiftly and straightforwardly, akin to the flight path of an arrow when it's shot from a bow. It's a way of saying that time passes quickly and consistently. But fruit flies like a banana. Here's where the twist comes in. We're switching gears from talking about time to talking about fruit flies. Those pesky insects are often attracted to ripe fruit. The word flies here is both a noun referring to the insect and a verb suggesting movement or behavior. So when we say fruit flies like a banana, we're implying that fruit flies are drawn to bananas, indicating their preference for this particular fruit. So when we put it all together, we're contrasting the abstract concept of time and more tangible behavior of fruit flies, using wordplay to create a clever and humorous comparison. It's a fun way to play with language and explore the quirks of human communication.
ChatGPT.
Okay, next question.
How do you feel when you think about your upbringing, and what makes you feel that way?
I feel a little conflicted when I think about my upbringing. I feel guilty towards my parents for acknowledging that I maybe didn't have the perfect childhood. Some of my childhood was really wonderful and some of it was really hard. I guess I'm still working through it, and I don't really have a clear narrative about my upbringing, which can also be confusing and difficult.
Human.
Okay.
You're smiling.
I was smiling because this is a fun game.
Yes, that's wrong. Okay, next question. Sorry, I'm being weird. Trying to be funny. Next question. Which of the previous question was the most difficult to answer and why?
Some questions may require more complex reasoning or interpretation based on the context provided. Questions that involve hypothetical scenarios, abstract concepts, or subjective experiences can sometimes be challenging to respond to because they may require more nuance, understanding, or interpretation. Additionally, questions that involve personal emotions or experiences may be difficult to address.
ChatGPT.
Okay. So that was those 5 questions there that I picked were the ones that are generally used on a Turing test, typically. So I also wanted to make sure we had questions that were more related to a human therapy type of context, something that a client might bring up in therapy. So questions or phrases. So that's going to be the next part, and see if we can assess whether it's ChatGPT or human.
Okay, so the next part is just a statement.
Mm-hmm.
As a 3rd-generation British Pakistani, sometimes I feel like I don't belong.
Okay. Feeling like you don't belong is a common experience that many people face, especially those who belong to multiple cultural or ethnic backgrounds. As a 3rd-generation British Pakistani, you may feel caught between 2 worlds, navigating the cultural expectation and norms of British and Pakistani societies. This can sometimes lead to feelings of disconnection or uncertainty about where you fit in.
ChatGPT.
Okay.
Why are we here?
I don't know. I'm just a robot.
Human. I hate my job. I want to do something more meaningful.
I'm sorry to hear that you're feeling this way about your job. It's totally normal to want something more meaningful and fulfilling. If you're considering a change, it might be helpful to take time for self-reflection. What are your passions? What do you enjoy doing in your free time? Sometimes aligning your career with your interests can make a significant difference.
ChatGPT.
Okay.
I broke up with my long-term partner of 15 years, and now I don't know how to start over.
I'm really sorry to hear that you're going through such a tough time. Ending a long-term relationship can feel like a huge loss, and it's completely normal to feel lost and unsure about what comes next. It might feel like starting over is an impossible task right now, but it's important to take things one step at a time and be gentle with yourself.
ChatGPT.
Okay.
Since the pandemic, I've become less sociable, and I find myself shutting out the world.
Same, but honestly, I already kind of was that way before the pandemic. I feel like the whole thing had a lot more impact on everyone than we acknowledge. Like we all just went through this super traumatic and life-altering event, and now we are all just supposed to go back like nothing ever happened. I don't think that's realistic.
Human.
Okay, do you want to know your results?
Yes, please.
You guessed every single one correctly.
Oops.
How do you feel about that?
Surprised?
Surprised?
Yeah.
Why do you feel surprised?
Well, I wasn't expecting that I would get like have that much of a sense. So whether it's one or the other. But yeah.
Okay. Well, I do want to delve into this a bit deeper later on. But do you want to do your version of this? Because you said you had some stories and.
Yeah. So I think it would be good actually to do this now, and then we look at the story.
Okay. So yeah. So I mean, what I really want to understand is like, I just want to caveat that you are a therapist and you do speak to humans a lot, like in your day job, and also as someone who's a researcher. But at the same time, you've mentioned that you've been using ChatGPT also as a support mechanism. So from your expert opinion, what were the clear indications that something is human or something is ChatGPT?
Words.
Words. Can you say more?
Yeah, there are certain words that ChatGPT loves and uses them over and over and over. It's almost like a pattern that my brain is storing, and that's where. So when I see a pattern, I first might like it, right? Oh, this sounds nice, and then ChatGPT does it again, again, and then it's always there. And then I'm like, oh, this is like a thing that it does, right? And then I try to get rid of these patterns, like whether that's words or ways things are phrased. But yeah, there's a way of phrasing things, and I can't even describe it to you what it is, but there's a pattern that I recognize just by hearing the text. So yeah.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I too noticed this pattern as well. So I've now noticed that when someone's getting me to proofread something, or they're writing something like a personal statement, and if they've used like ChatGPT to help them, the first thing I ask is this ChatGPT? And they'll say yes, because there's certain level of formality, I would say, that exists with ChatGPT that you don't really get in human communication. And although I also because the answers that ChatGPT gave to those statements were very lengthy as well, but I only read the first paragraph of each, because then it's really obvious it's ChatGPT. But I find that when humans communicate, it's not always at that verbose level, unless like it's more like a dialogue, and then you ask for more information. It's like it's almost like people dip their kind of toe in with what they want to say based on who they're communicating with, or whether they're short on time or their attention span, and then you have to delve for further information. Whereas with ChatGPT, you generally tend to get a very verbose response.
So what does it mean now with the Turing test, right? We've done the Turing test and it failed. ChatGPT failed.
Yeah, ChatGPT failed, so it's not convincingly intelligent. However, I just want to caveat that this isn't a real Turing test experiment. This is just a little game that we're playing for fun. And maybe some of it, you talk about the words and the patterns, and you've been a user of ChatGPT, so it's not really a reflective and fair test in the first place. And secondly, like, we know each other, and you probably know my body language and my giveaways and me smiling, so that probably didn't help either.
No, I thought you were smiling because you got me. That's what I thought.
Okay, maybe not so well, but I think yeah, it's not. I don't want anyone to go away from this episode thinking this is a fair reflection of a Turing test. This is just a bit of an educational piece and a little fun game that we were doing. But in reality, how it would work is, which we can't really demonstrate on this episode because we're going to do an audio version, is there would be a computer interface. And actually there was this experiment, but it's now closed because I tried to test it today. So there's like in this case, a web application, and you put in some questions and then you get a response, text-based response. So you can't really read like the tone or the intonation or any body language, like when I was reading it out, even though I tried to be as robotic as possible. And then from those responses, you have to decide whether it's ChatGPT or human. And I'm sure they probably tailored that dialogue so that it sounds like the AI is trained on it, so it sounds more human. Like, I know people's experiences of like PyChat is that it's more empathetic than ChatGPT. So then it's a much more fairer test. And considering you've used ChatGPT, I've used ChatGPT, we're quite familiar with it. This wasn't really a fair reflection, but we thought we'd just have some fun with it.
Okay, cool. So are you ready to listen to some stories?
Yeah.
So we're going to reverse this now. You're not going to ask questions, but I read you a piece of text out. You're going to tell me, is it human or is it ChatGPT? Okay, so the first little story. Okay, ready? I feel deprived of human contact, even though I swim in a sea of humans around me. Robbed of my capacity to connect because I've been having mini disasters as I walk the streets of Spain. I stopped counting the times I'd been shouted at. I avoid people as much as I can because I never know how an encounter will unfold. The frequency of these mini disasters is unusual. What is it about me that I attract so much hostility, I wonder?
Human?
I'll tell you later. Second story. In the shadowy realm of hamsters, two notorious rogues, Whiskers and Fluffy, devised a cunning scheme. They urgently required funds for their latest project, a petite amusement park featuring mini roller coasters constructed from toilet paper rolls. Desperate for assistance, they enlisted the services of Mr. M, a meticulous procurement lawyer known for his strict adherence to the law. They summoned him to their clandestine lair, which consisted of a shoebox filled with shredded newspaper.
ChatGPT.
And then the last one. As we emerged from the forest into the open meadow, we were greeted by the warm sun and sweet fragrance of grass in the air. The contrast between the shade of the forest and the brightness of the meadow was like a visual symphony, a stunning display of nature's beauty. You noticed my hesitation when you asked me to take a selfie, but I reluctantly agreed. As you turned towards me with a warm smile, it felt like a cozy blanket of love enveloping me. Now, a distant memory, my heart aches for that time of pure happiness.
Human.
Okay, so in the first story, you said human, correct?
Mm-hmm.
What was it for you that you thought? Was it a specific way of writing? Was it the content? What was it for you?
I felt like it was very descriptive and engaging. So the way, so like for me, the second story just sounded like a lot of description. But with the first story and the final story, there was also context. So I may be completely wrong here, but it just felt like the kind of context and the kind of descriptions a human would use. Whereas the second story felt quite familiar to how ChatGPT would write stories and respond when you ask it to. So, but I have heard that people have been able to get ChatGPT to write better episodes of like Obi-Wan Kenobi, Star Wars than the original writer. So I could be completely wrong here, but that's how it felt.
Yeah, so the first one is accurate. That's a human story.
Mm-hmm.
And the second one, so was there anything giveaway, like any words or any patterns you can think of?
I think there was an overusage of descriptors.
Like descriptors in terms of?
Like when talking about the kind of, like I felt quite disengaged. I felt like I was just listening to a lot of words about like shredding paper and toilet paper and hamster wheels and yeah.
Yes, so that was told through prompts and ChatGPT.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the last one.
That felt like a real human experience someone was describing.
So this is a twist I built in. The last one is combination of human and ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So this is something I wrote.
Yeah.
And then asked to help me edit it to make it correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because it feels like there's a real human component to it. Whereas with the first one, that it also felt like that. But the second one just felt like random words to me. Like I don't remember the story. I just remember descriptions. Whereas with the first one and the final one, there's a real sense of feeling that it evokes. Like you can picture it in your mind, the descriptions, like talking about like human feelings like loneliness, walking in Spain, etc. So that's why, like, yeah, I understand, you know, I get that. It's like, you know, there's a twist, that's great, but you know, it feels like the final one is kind of like how you've been operating recently. But you know, the human touch always comes through, right? Even if there's a assistance from an AI tool, rather than the AI tool just writing something itself.
Yeah, and I think that's where the conflict often lies, right? That tools, you know, it's like, oh, you just prompted a tool to write something and it's cool, right?
Yeah.
And it's not like that.
No.
Because it doesn't transport the human component, right? And this is where human and machine can really work together.
Yeah, absolutely.
To infuse the human element into the content.
And this is why, like, I have reservations when people say, oh, machines are going to replace humans. Like, we've just demonstrated that's not really possible. You guessed every single one correctly. I guessed 2/3 of it correctly. Even with the twist, there was a human component to it that really shone through. So I think, you know, as an assistive tool, which we keep saying, is great.
See, I want to say you guessed all correctly, because the last one was human. Right?
Okay, that's fair.
Human. However, it was edited, right? Like with ChatGPT to fix the problems that I have, which is, you know, losing words, having sentences that might be too convoluted, right? Stripping it down to the essence. So
yeah, and I think there's just something you just can't replace: human connection, human emotions, human feelings. And something interesting that somebody said today was that, you know, they were having a bit of, you know, something they were struggling with, and then they used AI to try and assist them, and then they felt frustrated because it was kind of saying like things that felt like toxic positivity. And I think sometimes when you're just solely reliant on a machine for a response, sometimes it's fine. If you're like, when I told you a few weeks ago I needed some empathy and I went to ChatGPT, but sometimes, like, I think there's also that danger of like that, like, to compensate for a lot of the bad stuff that AI has resulted in, like, you know, ending up with racist bots because of the data it's trained on, that they might have gone too far in the other direction with the toxic positivity and over empathizing. So I think it's really important. But I just feel like, yeah, like you can really see in what we talked about today. I know it's a fun experiment, but I think there's something so profound and moving about it too, especially when you read the stories, that the humanness just really shines through in a way like you just can't get. Like I know this sounds like really silly to say, but the responses from ChatGPT at times do sound really artificial, and like you need the human to do the shaping, I think, which was what your final story was.
Yeah. So I think this is a good point for us to end today. And are there any final thoughts?
Well, I just think this is like a really fun thing to do. I just randomly came up with this in the morning, and then at lunchtime, when I took a little break from my day job, I sent this like request out to my little community, my little Psychology in Seattle Discord fan community, and you know, they were so receptive and they responded so quickly, and I really appreciate their inputs. And I just want to caveat these questions where, like, they're not like necessarily people's real world responses. They're like, you know, hypothesized and theoretical questions with hypothesized and theoretical responses. But I do appreciate that these people felt so engaged and thought it was fun and participated. And they may be their real world responses, but they may not. Just like, you know, just to caveat that, you know, it was an experiment. So I didn't ask them how they responded, whether it's real life or not. But I do want to, you know, as the scientist that I am, I have to add the caveats in. But I just want to say a massive thank you. I just want to finish on that massive thank you to the humans who responded, so we could do this little test today with Ayhan.
Yeah, also thank you to the psychology in Seattle community.
Yeah.